Hello and welcome to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. My name is Leon Wolf. I am your host, and we're delighted that you joined us. Today is Thursday, the 19th of February, and we are excited to be joined by our regular panel of hosts, minus one. We have with us, as always, Scott Lincicome from the Cato Institute. Thank you for joining us, Scott. Neal of the Federalist is with us, as always. F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon is here, as he always is, and we're also excited to have with us as our guest host Matt Dawson. You know him from Twitter as Saint RPH, and Heather Wilhelm of Real Clear Politics is joining us back on the show. Thank you guys for joining us. Is everybody hearing me okay? I'm having a little bit of a lag issue. Are we good to go? Okay. Well, let's get right into the news of the day, and we are getting ever closer to the possibility that the Department of Homeland Security will face a shutdown in light of a congressional fight over Obama's executive amnesty program. The Republicans promised to fight this, and it looked for a while that they would cave, but it seems as though to a certain extent they've been emboldened by a decision from a Texas judge that was handed down earlier this week that put a halt to the program. And now it seems like, at least, they may stand firm, and DHS may actually shut down, at least for a brief period. And as is our custom, we're going to go to our guest, Matt Dawson, for the first question. My first question is this, Matt: is there going to be a shutdown? Do you think it's more likely than not that we're going to see a shutdown in DHS? Is Matt with us? Have we lost Matt? All right, let's go to Heather. You're our next guest. Heather, what do you think? Is DHS going to shut down? We're about a week away. Do you think that's a likely thing to happen?
You know, when I first heard the news that DHS might shut down, I was really pumped because I thought, oh my gosh, I can finally take my shampoo on the plane. I was so excited. I always have to, check an extra bag. And but it's interesting. Even if DHS does shut down, it's not going to make a bit of difference. I think most of the employees are considered essential. There's maybe a couple thousand employees that this would impact. So my thought on this is, in 2013 when they had the whole Obamacare government shutdown and everyone was anxiety-ridden about, are they going to blame the Republicans? And, even Tom Coburn got out there and said, Republicans, this is going to be a disaster. This is folly. And then, of course, fast forward a year later, and Republicans dominate the midterm elections. This is an issue I think that, A, even if it does shut down, it kind of doesn't matter, and B, it's one of those DC things that's going to blow over. I don't think it has a negative repercussion for Republicans. That's my take. But
Heather, do you think that this Texas judge's order, which has essentially put a halt to the whole program, there's kind of two schools of thought about this. One is that it's actually made a shutdown more likely because essentially they're fighting about nothing, and the other is that it's made it less likely because a lot of Republicans, and we saw John McCain just today come out and say, look, this is in the courts. The courts are going to solve this. Why don't we just let the courts deal with this and not have this fight? Let's go ahead and fund DHS now. What do you think the effect of the Texas judge's order is going to be?
it's interesting because, you have, I've seen some commentators come out and say, oh, well, the judge has, blocked the immigration portion of this bill. So, Republicans, why don't you just go ahead and just pass it? It doesn't matter, right? It's probably going to get struck down. I mean, talk about no principles, right? That's the exact sort of thing that the American people are tired of. It's playing this game. I've seen a few proposals, and National Review was one of them that suggested splitting up the bill, which would be a bit of a compromise, but then you've got the DHS portion, you've got the immigration portion. That seems like a way smarter way to go than just, being so cynical and signing off on this bill that you've trumpeted that you don't believe in just because of some legal technicality. That's what I would say.
So, Scott, let me throw this to you for the next question. There was a CNN poll that came out a couple days ago that said, they asked the question, if there is a shutdown of DHS, who would you blame? And the respondents said 53% said, well, we would blame the Republicans in Congress. 30% said President Obama. 13% said combination of both. Omitted from that question consideration is the possibility of the Democrats in Congress taking blame, of course. In addition to those results, though, 55% of the people surveyed said that if DHS did have a shutdown, it would constitute either a crisis or a major problem. whereas the other 45% said somewhere on down the line. So I guess the question I have for you is, what do you think, if there is a shutdown, what, if anything, will be the political fallout from that?
I think that, as is the usual case, Republicans will suffer more simply because the mainstream media will frame it as a Republican failure. And not only that, just in general, these polls tend to skew towards Democrats. So, regardless of the merits, I think that you're going to see Republicans take more of the blame. It's just simply how these things work.
All right, Matt, glad to have you back with us. Sorry, it's been a technical difficulties night all around. So let me ask you about this. We've been talking about the DHS shutdown. What do you think the right play is here politically? I mean, is there a way out of what seems to be kind of a rock and a hard place for Republicans in the Senate? Because obviously a lot of Republican voters want the Senate to stand firm. There's a possibility that they may take a blame if DHS does shut down. What do you think the right path forward for the Republicans is?
First of all, I was gone because Joe Biden was whispering in my ear. No, I think that they're going to get blamed either way. We're going to get a shutdown. We're not going to get a shutdown. It's going to no matter what happens, it's going to be our fault. So McConnell's playing hardball. I don't really see a good end game on this.
All right, Bill. So Heather's already kind of touched on this, and when we think about what actually would happen in the event that a shutdown occurred, something like 87% of DHS employees, of course, are going to remain at work, but some of them, of course, are going to have to be expected to be at work without a paycheck, and the argument is, well, that's going to affect, morale and some other things. What, if anything, do you think the potential implications are of a DHS shutdown? I mean, is it something that, like in the past shutdown, it happened and people said, gosh, I didn't really notice anything different, Republicans didn't pay a price, or is it going to be something that there's going to be a real difference?
I actually don't think it's going to make too big a difference. If you look at how federal workers, essential employees, dealt with the last shutdown, they didn't end up actually paying too big a price. In fact, these are federal workers. They know their quote-unquote rights better than anybody else, and they know bureaucracy better than anybody else. So all across the Maryland and Virginia and the D.C. region, we had employees just signing up for unemployment benefits in the 2 weeks that the government was actually shut down. So I think we'll see, a few people who have saved their money and, they'll be fine, but many others will just sign up for new government benefits and they'll get a government paycheck somehow. Of course, when they go back to work, they'll be required to return that money they collected from unemployment, but for some reason I don't see that happening.
All right, Neal, so what do you think the right thing is here? I mean, it's one thing for all of us to come out and to debate this in the abstract, but one thing that you think is potential commercial material here is that, of course, right after the elections, you had Boehner and McConnell standing in front of a podium and saying, listen, we swear to you there will be no shutdowns when we take over the government. I mean, is that going to present a problem if there is one, in fact, less than a full month after they take control of the Congress?
I was a big critic of the last shutdown. I don't think it worked, and I think it actually hurt Republicans. I do think that probably there will be some political consequences to the oncoming shutdown, but I support it wholeheartedly, and let me tell you why. I bet Thomas LeDuc one bottle of bourbon that the Republicans would do the right thing and oppose President Obama's immigration executive order gambit. And I am just thrilled that it looks like I'm actually going to win that bet, because I bet that the Republicans would actually stand up for constitutional principles, conservatism itself, and not crumble, which, that's usually a losing bet, usually. But this time I had faith, and it looks like I might actually be getting that bottle of bourbon after all. So when I see Mr. LeDuc at CPAC next week, I'm going to rub his nose in it, unless something really weird happens, like the Republicans caving at the last minute.
That would be weird.
That would be so weird.
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you a follow-up question. Do you win the bottle of bourbon if they just cause a shutdown, or do they have to succeed? Because, I mean, that's the other part of that, right? I mean, they might shut it down for a week. Do they have the stomach to shut it down for a month or 2 months or however long it takes?
The bet was that they would take a principled stand. There was no timetable on how long they would take a principled stand. The only problem is if we go to the end of February, if we get out of February and nothing has really happened, it's a draw. Nobody wins, essentially. It invalidates the bet, because the bet was that they would do it in February. So this Texas judge may have actually cost me this bottle of bourbon, because his action may give the Republicans some breathing room, some time to think here. And you know what happens when Republicans think? They usually wuss out.
Yes, all right. Well, let's move on to the next topic. I think this is going to take out the bulk of our time. Of course, the issue with ISIS really across the globe, the Islamic State, is kind of dominating the news in a lot of different arenas. We're going to try to touch on all of them. It's going to be a very foreign policy heavy show tonight, and I'm going to throw this back over to Heather first. There was a great article at Real Clear Politics today that talked about the way that Obama's view of the United States' role in the Middle East and in North Africa is that he clearly sees us as being a kind of a backseat driver whose job is essentially to let the local governments and the regional players take a lead role. And the problem that we've seen, especially in the last 6 months, is that this strategy has exposed that these local governments, these regional players, are really, they're paper tigers and or corrupt and or the enemy themselves. So I guess my question to you is, do you think that the events of these last 6 months are going to cause him at all to reassess his approach to the Middle East, or does he continue doing the same things he's done before and just hope for a better result?
You know, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of reassessment going on. It was interesting this week to see, you know, the crazy talking points that were coming out of the administration, you know, with Marie Harf saying about how ISIS needed jobs, and Obama talking on and on and on, and basically throwing out a bunch of buzzwords that didn't mean anything. It was interesting because I kept thinking to myself, you know, okay, well, I understand if the Obama administration is sitting here saying, okay, ISIS is not religious because they have some strategic reason to do so. And I was highly doubtful of that. I think that they actually believe that. But it was interesting to see Obama doubling down on that approach this week, saying, no, actually this is strategic, and if you don't echo my talking points, Republicans, you are helping ISIS. I think that sort of illustrates a huge stubbornness, a huge lack of reflection, and so I don't think anything reality-based is going to change the approach, at least not, you know, not in the next few months.
So Matt, let's talk about our good friend Marie Harf and the comments that she made. And so for those who don't know, who might not have been following this story, which is, I guess, kind of obscure to those who aren't on Twitter all the time, State Department spokesman Marie Harf essentially said that, you know, really the way that we need to stop ISIS from being terrorists is we go and start a good jobs program over there, and they'll have jobs, and then they won't want to be terrorists. And look, she's so it's caused two interesting reactions. Number one is kind of the flack that she's gotten from the right, and number two, the defense that she's gotten from the left. And as I sit here and watch all of this furor take place back and forth, the question that I have is, how is what she said materially different from what George W. Bush said for years back in 2003, 2004, 2005 about why and how we were going to go into Iraq and we were going to give them prosperity and good jobs, and they weren't going to want to be terrorists anymore? Is there material difference between her position and George W. Bush's position 10 years ago?
Well, yeah, we had shock and awe back then, and now it's like shock and here's some applications to fill out. So So it's almost like an Occupy ISIS movement. We're going to deploy the drum circles and get the banksters out of ISIS. But I've got a list here of what we can do to make ISIS an enemy. So first we need to ask ISIS what they feel about evolution. That's number one. That way, I mean, whatever their answer is, you know, that, well, they believe Muhammad created, so I'm guessing they're anti-evolution. Then we need to find out where they graduated college, or if they graduated college. So did they go to Fallujah U? And did they attend Beta Omega Mu as a fraternity? And how do they feel about vaccines? Would they bake a cake for a gay couple? We need to know these things. What about the disparity in the African Americans in the Oscar nominations? Why aren't ISIS people being asked this? I think that would help the State Department be well on our way to making them enemy number one in the world.
All right, Matt, thank you very much for that perspective. Bill, what do you think here?
Can we post that list on the site at the end of the show?
I think that we should. I think we have to have it in Matt's
Submit it to
handwriting.
Box. There's like the 5 ways that we can actually solve the ISIS crisis.
Yes.
I need
Bill,
to take Marie Harf's place.
I think that's the best idea we've ever had on this show.
I could be Maria Servino / with Dana Carvey and be Marie Harf. It would be a very easy transition. I've already got the hipster glasses. I just need the blonde wig. I've got the list. Let's do this.
Yeah, and you have to get out of whatever prison you're broadcasting from. That's probably essential.
I was hoping someone would mention that because I do have yard time at this moment. The warden did let me wear a tie and some smokes, which I traded for wink wink. But we'll leave that for another podcast.
All right, right on.
Cable
All right,
Island.
so let's go back over to Bill. And Bill, you know, what do you think about this? I mean, obviously what Matt brought up in addition to all these amazing ideas was that, you know, George Bush, to start with, said he was going to send in some troops, and so that kind of establishes one difference. But isn't it philosophically the same thing as the George Bush says, look, we're going to go over there, we're going to give these people money, they're going to be happy, they're not going to want to kill us anymore. He was laughed at for years by these exact same people for saying this, and now it's kind of a role reversal. And when I wrote about this at Red State today, I said, listen, whatever you think about George W. Bush's plan and whether it was likely to succeed or not, it at least had the virtue of having not been tried yet, right? So now we have all the same people who are on the record saying it was a dumb idea, now saying it's a great idea. Where do we go from here on this particular talking point? Is this something we're going to revisit again? Is whether jobs are the answer?
Well, I mean, I think the key difference here, and how you can tell the Obama spin machine is really in full swing right now, is the implications that underlied both of these administrations when they essentially said the same thing. We need to give them good jobs. George Bush, we knew, was coming from a place where he said, we're going to give them good jobs as soon as we've killed them all, and their children, instead of joining up with the insurgency and also coming to kill us, would enjoy freedom and they wouldn't come get us. The Obama administration seems to be saying that if only we had a stimulus program or, you know, something along those lines, these guys would drop their weapons and ditch the insurgency. So I think that's a key distinction to make, is the fact that George Bush was speaking from a place of power. We knew he was going to use military force when necessary. And Obama, we know, is not going to use military force when necessary because he's actively opposed this again and again and again and actively cut down our presence in the region. So I think that's the key distinction here, is at what point do we start the jobs program? Do we stop the jobs program after we've conquered our enemy and you know, overthrown a regime? Or do we start the jobs process while they're still raping children and crucifying children?
But
think
ultimately, we tried it the first way, didn't we? And it didn't work. I mean, essentially, isn't that where we are now?
It works when you have American troops on the ground. Fallujah stays under stays within civilization if we have American troops there, if we have bases. If we have American troops who are 5 miles away from 45 people being burned to death, and their commander-in-chief is telling them, under no scenario are you allowed outside of this base, well, chaos arises. Mass murder follows. That kind of thing tends to happen.
And I'll just add there's another key distinction, I think, between the kind of Bush anti-terror policies and what's going on right now. Eli Lake had a great column, I think, yesterday, and then of course this fantastic deep dive by Graham Wood over the weekend in the Atlantic. ISIS is a different animal from Al Qaeda and from other terrorist organizations. And one of the things, as Eli Lake noted, was that this is not about a jobs program. This is not the kind of standard academic idea that you have disengaged youth that if only they had jobs they wouldn't join up with this terror organization. Instead, it's about the romance of ISIS. It's about the caliphate, and it's about boredom among extremely well-educated and wealthy individuals who just see this kind of romantic ideal of ISIS and the caliphate, and they move to join. So it has nothing to do with jobs or college or any of these types of these ideas. It has to do with the romance of ISIS. And oh gosh, who was it? Just a while ago, there was another fantastic article about the glamour of ISIS as well by Virginia Postrel. And the idea, and she nailed it. The same thing. It said, look, the way to defeat these guys is by de-glamorizing what's going on there. And of course, one way to do that is absolutely destroying them. But the other way is to show kind of the monotony and the horribleness of just the existence as a quote-unquote, freedom fighter, or terrorist, or whatever it is. And it's a lot different from this idea of giving them jobs or a college education.
So what do you think along those lines about the New York Post article from either yesterday or the day before showing that essentially all these Al-Qaeda guys are major porn hounds? I mean, did you see that article? I mean, is that where we need to go from now? I mean, here are your religious leaders. Look at the comments that they've left, on...
Deploy Sasha Gray.
Actually, and that's one of the things that Postrel noted that I thought was great, was she said, look, not only do you need to show just the type of people that really are in charge, but you also need to show how bad a life is as a junior terrorist in ISIS. And it's actually really interesting how, a lot of the guys that went to ISIS and left talk about how their days weren't spent securing jihad. It was spent cleaning latrines and doing really horrible things. And so that's the other side of it. Not only do you show kind of the perversion and the problems in the leadership, not only do you of course try to kick their asses, but you also show just how horrible, monotonous the drudgery of life as a junior terrorist in the caliphate.
So pretty much it's we point out to ISIS and those they're recruiting that global jihad is not like playing Call of Duty. Is that pretty much it?
Kinda, yeah.
Look how much bureaucracy you have to deal with.
That's part of it. It's amazing. I mean, that was Eli Lake's point too. Is that look, you look at these guys. They are college-educated, wealthy individuals. A lot of them. They're not drawn to this because they don't have a job. They're drawn to it because of this romantic ideal of killing Westerners as part of the expanding caliphate. If you can puncture that myth, however you do it, you make a lot more headway than the again, this silly notion of a stimulus program in the Middle East.
So Neal, let me throw this over to you and shift gears just a little bit. We focus on the problem of ISIS in Iraq and Syria have been kind of the main news items, but if you look specifically what's going on in Libya, Libya right now is just an absolute chaos. You know,
Sure.
possibly worse than any of the other locations that get more press, and is in danger of falling totally and completely under the control of the Islamic State, and has been in chaos really for more or less 4 solid uninterrupted years since we intervened in Libya. And listen, you know, I love the enthusiasm that people have, you know, on Twitter from time to time, and I don't want to minimize what happened there, but we are still focusing to this day on the Benghazi situation. I feel like maybe we need to realize that everything has been really milked out of that, then that is going to be milked out of that. People think that this is going to be this silver bullet for Hillary, this investigation. We've had something like 30 hearings between the House and the Senate by now on what happened in Benghazi. And I guess my question is, well, first of all, my personal view on this, you can't kill a Clinton with scandals. It's been tried. They're immune to that. It's like shooting a werewolf with a bullet that isn't silver. It's not.
It only makes them stronger.
Exactly. So I mean, to me,
Keith Richardson drugs.
Exactly. It's the same exact philosophy. So is there a way to move on from the Benghazi stuff and talk about just what Libya is now and Hillary Clinton's personal involvement in that? I mean, more than any other foreign policy sphere, Libya was her baby. And how do we shift the conversation away from something I think everybody's tired of to something that's relevant now?
Well, we could point out the fact that Italy is in extreme danger of actually being invaded by ISIS at the moment. I read an article this week about how their defense forces are wholly inadequate to deal with any kind of sustained assault. Their Coast Guard is actually rescuing refugees from Libya who happen to sometimes contain ISIS terrorists, and they just don't have the infrastructure. They have like 5,000 combat-ready troops, something like that. So there's a very real possibility that we could have Sicily or something retaken by the Muslims, because back in the whatever 1400s or something, it was taken over by the Islamic Caliphate or something. And so Libya is a huge problem. That's how I would talk about Libya today. I really wouldn't mention Benghazi. I agree with you that I think that we've tried to kick over every stone that we possibly can with Benghazi. Nothing is going to stick to Hillary Clinton. Absolutely nothing. It's going to be remembered in the history books as tragic. It's going to be this unfortunate episode, but it's not going to be this ongoing scandal. People who thought it was going to be the silver bullet, sadly mistaken. So yeah, I think we should just drop it altogether, cold. Just stop talking about Benghazi. Don't hold any more stupid hearings about Benghazi. Forget it. Focus on the actual threat, which is the Islamic State, the renewed caliphate.
See, Neal, this is why we have you on the program, is all of the people who watch us by Twitter, who get to us by Twitter, need to have someone upon whom to focus their hate so they can send me angry emails. We're glad that you always are willing to
stand. What do Twitter think is actually going to happen if we keep focusing on Benghazi, which happened so many years ago? It's practically irrelevant. What's happening right now is indicting Barack Obama's leadership far more than Benghazi ever could. His moral failure to confront ISIS at this moment in time is going to be judged by history, folks. So drop Benghazi, focus on what's actually happening right now. ISIS may be threatening Italy, which means it's going to threaten a lot of our history and culture and our spaghetti. Don't forget the spaghetti. I'm joking here, but it's serious. Benghazi, crap. ISIS, actual issue.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first, folks. Neal Dewing, quote unquote, at this point, what difference does it make? Heather, we're going to go over to you, and I see that I stole this joke from you, actually. Let's talk a little bit about Obama's speech that he made. where he kind of outlined what he thinks is a change in foreign policy direction with respect to confronting the problems that are in the Middle East and Northern Africa right now. And one of the things that he's taking, I guess, kind of the most heat for, sufficient heat that he felt the need to kind of come back and clarify a day later, is he refused to refer to it as Islamic terrorism. And he called it just essentially extremism. What manner of extremism, we're just left to guess what that might be. What do you think of both the decision and his defense of the decision, which is to say, his defense of it was, look, I don't want to give these religious leaders in ISIS and Al-Qaeda the legitimacy that they're wanting, which is to say, look, we want to be the people who are defending Islam from these evil folks in the West, and he doesn't want to be the guy that gives them that ammunition. What do you think of Obama's decision to take that approach, not as a political matter, but as the guy who really is in charge of the armed forces?
Well, on one hand, I was kind of relieved to see him double down on that, because then at least he was pretending that there was a strategic reason for him making these absurd statements. It's interesting, today, even at Vox.com, there was an article saying, okay, Mr. President, it's time to stop pretending that ISIS is not a religious group, because it clearly is. It's kind of this hilarious back and forth. President Obama says, the Islamic State is not Islamic, and then they'll pipe up and say, yes, we are. And it's strange, and I don't think it's helpful for our strategic directions in the Middle East. I mean, it's extremely important to understand your enemy. And if you're denying that this group is religious, and by the way, of course the Islamic State does not represent Islam as a whole, but guess what? They're pretty well versed in the Quran. They're very serious religious people, and it's absurd to pretend otherwise if you're going to try to, target them. It's a strange thing to me to say, that, and it's kind of an arrogance, really, right, to think that us declaring them non-Islamic is going to make it so. It seems very almost provincial. So strategically, I think it's not helpful, but I was at least glad to see him pretend that it was strategic. So that was good.
Right. I mean, listen, I'm just of the opinion that if somebody tells me they believe something, I take them at face value until I see some evidence to the contrary. I don't think that we do this with any other area of thought except in this one particular issue. Somebody says, I'm a member of the Rotary Club, we say, okay, well, you're a member of the Rotary Club, unless we go and check the rolls and say that they're not on there. I think that we take these people seriously and at face value. But let me turn this in a little bit different direction. I'm going to go to Matt here. With the full understanding, I have no idea what kind of answer I'm going to get to this question. But as we look at the terror attacks that happened this week in Denmark, which were kind of similar to the ones that happened in France from a couple of weeks ago, these are folks who, it appears in this case, probably a lone gunman, but working with some planning help. They're not part of necessarily an organized network like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or whatever the situation is. And what they are is essentially people who are disaffected and disgruntled with the way things are going in Europe right now, both economically and also culturally in a lot of different ways. And we seem to be seeing a lot more of these attacks, at least with frequency, than we would see some outside group actually infiltrating someone into a country like the United States or Western Europe and performing an attack that kills people. What do you think is the greater threat that we face right now? Is it these kind of disaffected Muslims who live on the fringes of society, or are we correct to focus on the organized groups that are running rampant in the Middle East and Northern Africa right now?
Well, considering all the polls that I've seen, it said that 80% of Muslims believe in Sharia law and want to enact Sharia law and would be okay with suicide bombings in certain cases. I think, they're on the wrong side on this. But as far as Italy goes, I want to say I would love to see the Vatican Guard in action with those pikes. Never seen those used. That would be great. Just kind of spin kick and go into it like that. And maybe resurrect Mussolini. I mean, he's probably still got some in him, And as far as the jobs program, I want to do #FightFor15 Goats. I think this would be a good selling point for any Muslim that would be serious about trying to overthrow, raise the goats. Hands up, more goats. The rape tents would be filled with goats. We can make this happen.
Oh my goodness! All right. Well, let's change direction a little bit, although still focusing on foreign policy. Talk a little bit about what's going on in Ukraine right now. Bill gets the first question on this one. So, Bill, we've seen over the last couple of days that Ukrainian troops have surrendered kind of a key rail depot in, and I always mess up, is Debaltseve, whatever. I can't say it right. This is an area, the Russians and Ukrainians had reached a truce, a ceasefire, and there was disagreement being mostly fabricated by the Putin side of this over whether that particular area was included in the original ceasefire. And so the Russians essentially kept attacking, and the Ukrainians have surrendered. This has been kind of the focal point of the fight. And I guess the question is, do you think the Ukrainians can rally and defend or keep any part of their territory at this point, or are they just going to accept being folded into Russia by the time this thing is done?
They really do not have the capability, and it's really not helping that President Obama is sending them aid in the form of blankets. Mark Stein wrote about that last week. The administration has given the go-ahead for $15 million to be spent on blankets and like medical supplies, which are surely what we need to beat the Russian bear. Yeah, it's the Ukrainians just cannot possibly contend with the Russian military, and the only thing to be said is that Russia's economy is being hurt right now. But I think that's actually going to have the reverse effect. The sanctions, and just make them all that more desperate to take possession of all this territory that they believe is rightfully theirs anyway. I think we're misunderstanding it when it's kind of goes back to what Scott was saying. The Russians think that Ukraine is theirs. They think they are entitled to Ukraine, and they will take whatever territory they need to, because they need to actually boost their sagging population. They have terrible demographics, and that's why they're trying to reclaim these ethnic Russians back into their society, because they need people at this point. I think that's something that no one is really touching on right now. This goes far beyond even just territory and natural resources right now. They actually need more people working for Russia itself. And I think unless we are able to impose such harsh sanctions, or we are actually able to have a deterrent effect militarily, I don't think we're going to stop them, and I don't think we're going to see them abide by, in a good faith way, any of these so-called ceasefires they've signed.
So you've raised an interesting point. I don't want to stay too long on it, but the issue of population growth, and Russia is facing a dire demographic collapse right now. Russia and China in particular are just going down the tubes, and what a lot of people don't understand or credit, and it is talked about almost never, is that one of the assumptions of a healthy and growing economy is a certain rate of population growth. I mean, that is built into any sort of model of an economy that works. And when people don't reproduce, as we're seeing happen in particular Russia and China, but all over the world, it's going to happen.
In the U.S. as well.
In the U.S. as well. To electric. Yeah.
If we're not counting immigrants.
It is a something that can cause dire financial consequences to our fiscal health. We'll come back to that in a future episode, just like we will to GMOs. But I want to go over to Scott here, and if you look at Ukraine, it is true that Ukraine is a little bit different of an animal in terms of the former Soviet republics, right? I mean, I have a friend who's kind of an expert in this area, and he says, look, half of Ukraine is really Poland East, and half of Ukraine is Russia West. There's a very little part of the population that identifies as any sort of Ukrainian identity. But a lot of the other countries that used to be under Soviet influence like the Baltic states and Poland and so on and so forth. That is not true for it, even though there is, a Russian ethnic component in a lot of these countries. And I guess the question that we have to ask ourselves is, if we've determined to say, listen, we're just going to let Russia have Ukraine, there's nothing we can or will do to stop it, is Putin going to take military action within the next 5-10 years against these Baltic state countries, Poland, some of those other places that he seems to maybe have his eye on? Or is he done once he gets to Ukraine and secures the pipeline?
I think that's a great question, and one that I don't have an answer to. I'm sorry. I think that the pipeline does make Ukraine rather unique in that sense. Obviously, there are the cultural and demographic issues that we've touched on. But the reality is, going back to kind of one of my areas that I actually know about, the pipeline that transits Ukraine, that feeds much of Europe and provides almost all of Europe's natural gas, at least right now, is critical to the Russian economy. And in a way to the Ukrainian economy, as they kind of use that to their advantage. So, whether those geopolitical and those economic and strategic issues can relate to the other Baltics, it's not quite certain. I will say, however, that it's smart, really smart, for countries like Lithuania to start doing building LNG import terminals so they can become independent, energy independent, or at least independent from Russia. So there's always the chance that weakness in Ukraine, or at least weakness by the United States with respect to Russia and Ukraine, will bleed over into other Baltic states. But I do think there is a very unique aspect here with respect to that pipeline. And the question then becomes, however, if Europe starts becoming independent of Russia, as they start building more LNG terminals, as more gas comes online, of course, if the United States will ever let us export it, then will Russia act out in other ways? And that's kind of the unanswerable question.
So, Neal, following up on that, let's suppose that Putin does. Let's say he, comes out tomorrow and says, I've decided that I would like to have Belarus, and therefore I'm going to take it. What, if anything, can or should we do? I mean, that's a tough sell to the American people to put any kind of troops or equipment, in that part of the country. Where does it stop? Does it stop if he decides to go to Poland? I mean, where do you think it will get to the point that the American people, led by our president, whoever that might be, will draw the line and say, we will oppose this with military force if necessary?
I honestly don't know, Leon. Obviously we have NATO and other treaty agreements, and we've provided a security shield for Europe since World War II. But with everything else going on in the world, would the American people have an appetite for war over what is essentially, a regional conflict, Russia sort of reabsorbing states that were previously in its orbit? It would be somewhat easy, I think, for people to make to accept that, as opposed to, say, accepting the utter horror taking place in the Middle East with ISIS. That said, I don't know if Putin will be that bold. I don't know for sure, but it seems to me that at a certain point he's going to start imperiling his financial interests and the financial interests of his cronies, which is really what keeps him in power to a large extent. So if that starts to happen, if we start to threaten the money, if the money starts to dry up, that may check the Russian advance more surely than tanks would. That said, I do not know when Putin is going to stop and what will satisfy him.
And it's a depressing thing for me personally to watch, because as you think about how half of Europe came to be under Soviet control in the first place, it's a depressing chapter in American history, the Yalta Conference, definitely. But on the other hand, it's understandable from the standpoint that we just finished wiping out Hitler, which was no small task.
Right. We have this thing, and this happened last time, where the Nazis were obviously the more uncivilized and barbaric enemy that needed to be expunged from the earth, as opposed to the communists, who were ultimately they had a higher body count and they were more vicious than the Nazis. But this time, bringing it back again to ISIS. This time we have a bunch of crazies in the Middle East crucifying people, burning children alive, burying them alive, selling them into sex slavery. So the Russians, they don't really seem like such bad guys compared to them. I can easily see myself not caring at all what happens to Belarus or the Ukraine.
Well,
in light of what's happening to the dwindling Christian population in Iraq and Syria, in light of what's going on daily under the sway of the caliphate.
Well, and I think that you used the key word there, which is seem, right? Because the thing that Russia does that's smart is that when they want to kill somebody, very rarely do they crucify them in the public square.
No, they take them in a room and shoot them.
And ship them off to Siberia somewhere to intentionally starve them to death, which is a much quieter thing and tends to not get people up in arms as much.
It's mechanized, it's more civilized, it's depersonalized, it's easier to ignore and overlook. Though I don't even know if they'd still do that. That was the old Russia. That was,
All right. So let's move on, and we're coming back around to Heather here. I'd like to talk a little bit about the EU. We've seen over the last months this kind of slow-motion train wreck playing out in Greece, to which the Greeks responded by essentially electing a further left government they had in place in the first place, and kind of sending that government out to tell Germany that we do not accept your terms of bailout and we demand that you give us new ones. To which Germany says, no, that's not how it works. I guess the question is, how, if at all, should the EU nations respond to this? I guess argument on behalf of the Greeks is, look, we went back to our people. Our people are clearly not going for it. We need to work out something different from what is on the table. I mean, is there a legitimate concern, at least on the part of the Greeks, of allowing the Germans to dictate what their physical policy is going to be? And how is the rest of Europe supposed to look at this situation that's going on?
Well, first, can I tell a little secret about the show to everyone watching?
Yes, go ahead.
If you see people laughing at inappropriate times, it's because people are texting each other. So if I was laughing or smiling during something horrible that someone else was saying, it may have seemed horribly inappropriate, but that's because someone was trying to make me laugh. I just want to get that out there, number one. Then
She's a monster.
She's been talking about how much she loves goat camps and stuff the entire time. That's all she's contributed. She's like, these ISIS guys are onto something with their sex.
I'm sorry if I've destroyed the magic sauce, but I just had to get that out there. But so okay, so Europe. I think what's going to happen probably is they're going to come up with some sort of fake solution, right? They're going to kick the can down the road. I think there already is a fake solution in the works, in which the Greeks have some sort of. It's going to be a fake solution. That's my bet. But I think the broader point is that it reveals the instability of the whole EU experiment, right? I mean, situations like this just show how it's an inherently unstable arrangement, and you can see this in countries like France, where Le Pen is rising, and by the way, Putin is giving her money. Putin gave money to the party that just won in Greece. I think whatever happens between Greece and Germany, I think it's going to be some patch-up, but what it indicates is a huge instability in the European Union. That's what I'd say.
So, Matt, as you look at this unfolding, the question occurs to me, over and over again as I watch the Greeks, kind of with this stubborn recalcitrance that they have, refuse to accept the terms that Germany, whoever is, attaches on giving them money, is why haven't the Greeks just been kicked out of the EU yet? Why isn't that the solution that has occurred to everyone, to say, look, Greeks, you clearly don't want to go with the program. You go do your own thing, and we'll stay the EU over here. Why hasn't that happened yet, Matt?
Well, I think they're holding out for a sequel to My Big Fat Greek Wedding, mainly. But back to Ukraine, the decrease in exports of mail-order brides will be horrible to our economy. I just want to point that out. Also, I'm kind of curious on what happened to the Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Are those under Putin's control? I'm really.
I don't think anybody wants them back. We all saw Borat.
Yeah, but they make good bad guys on movies.
All right, so let's go back over to Scott and finish off with the kind of serious questions for tonight. We'll get the last one because we had kind of a knockdown, drag out argument on Twitter, as much as you can on Twitter about this earlier today. And as you watch this problem and rejecting the austerity measures and so on and so forth, doesn't this whole illustrate the importance of maintaining your own to maintain your national sovereignty? I mean, isn't that one of the things that you give up when you essentially give up?
Well, you lagged a little bit on me, but I think I know what you were getting at. You know, one of the kind of primary critiques of the entire EU system is what you were getting at, and that is that it is impossible to have a customs, more than a customs union, so to have this kind of supranational government and allow the national governments to maintain sovereignty over their fiscal positions and their citizens. So what you have is exactly what we see in the EU right now. You have Greek citizens voting in a government that wants the state to maintain their level of welfare benefits, tax evasion, and public services and the rest. Meanwhile, you have a German government that has been empowered by its citizens to demand fiscal austerity and to continue along the same path that the EU's been on for years, which really has benefited Germany very much to the at the expense of some of the southern European countries. So what do? How do you resolve that issue? Clearly, it can't be done in the European Parliament, and you end up with situations just like we have now, with two quote-unquote sovereign nations fighting over the combined or coherent monetary policy of the Union, and there's no good answer. And I agree with Heather entirely that the solution, it seems, is going to be this kind of fake agreement to muddle through, and we'll deal with the next crisis when it comes along in 18 months.
Yeah, and it's it's interesting to me as the EU was forming. People brought this up and they said, well, look, it's going to be people travel across Europe. They don't like to have to change their money every so often. Look, there's market inefficiencies definitely that the creation of the euro set out to fix. But one of the things that a lot of people brought up at the time, which was ignored, I think, to the detriment of all concerned, is look, for better or worse, as you point out, if you're Greece and you want to just continue essentially having unsustainable social services, you can really more or less as a country kind of continue to print your way. Now eventually you're going to get into a situation like Zimbabwe is in. Nobody will take your money and so on and so forth. But that's a policy choice that your people as a country really democratically ought to have the right to make. And I think that by essentially joining into the Eurozone, the people have surrendered a large part of what I think their democracy is all about. So let's kind of conclude our show here with the lightning rounds. We're running out of time. We're actually going to end on time for once, as we went 10 or 15 minutes over the last couple weeks in a row. And we have a fun lightning round for you tonight. Some of you may have seen, is a story made the rounds on Twitter and some of the news shows, that there was a politician in Montana, a state legislator, who proposed, of all things, outlawing yoga pants on the grounds that it made the women too attractive and was too distracting for the productivity of the men of the state. I think we can all say clearly this is the worst idea any politician is going to have in the year 2015. This guy wins. So lightning round, though, is going to be, what's the second worst idea a politician is going to come up with in 2015? What's your prediction for the second worst idea a politician will have in 2015? Heather, you're up first.
I don't think you can get much worse than outlawing yoga pants. I wrote an impassioned defense of yoga pants on the Federalist, and in that article I said if you want to outlaw yoga pants, you might as well outlaw things like fun. It's a terrible idea. So maybe a worse idea would maybe be prohibition, but that's what I'm going to go for. The yoga pants was a terrible blow to America.
All right, Matt, you're up next. What do you think is the second worst idea that a politician is going to come up with in 2015?
I'm pro yoga pants, but have a grant to interpret Biden's whisperings and discover that he is actually Slugworth from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and that he is trying to obtain all the everlasting gobstoppers. So that might actually be a good idea, actually. I'm going to say that's a good idea, not a bad idea, but I don't want to Nicky Slugworth.
All right. All right, Scott, what do you think? Second worst idea any politician is going to have in 2015?
Yeah, well, I think, obviously now that there's a gaping hole in MSNBC's lineup with the departure, really unfortunate departure of Ronan Farrow and Joy Reid, we're going to see the Harf Sakai happy fun time hour inevitably come up. And at that time, I think that we might see some pushback from some evil Republican politicians really pushing back against what will be the finest 2 hours of television in the history of American programming. So that would be probably my second worst. I mean, the Harf Sakai super happy fun time 2 hours will be a fantastic display of Americanness. And I think any Republican who stands in the way of that is just a fascist and deserves the same thing the yoga pants guy got.
That is so true. There was a great article at, I think it was NRO yesterday, described those two as the Lucy and Ethel of Foggy Bottom. And it's true. It's so true. They are going to make compelling television someday, and I hope that no one ever shuts them down. Bill, you're up next. Second worst idea any politician's going to have in 2015.
I just want to start by saying I hate yoga pants, and they represent decline. So I'm all about banning them. So that is...
Well, this is Bill's last episode on the program. Everyone, I say this every week, Bill gets fired, but this time I might mean it.
I'm drinking Andre right now, for those of you who want to know. It's empty. Actually, there's a perennial piece of legislation that I know is going to come up this year, and I hate it every year. As you might know, today is the third best day of the year. It is the day where Mets pitchers and catchers report for spring training, which is awesome. And every single year, some idiot lawmaker proposes legislation to declare opening day for baseball a national holiday, robbing American people of lying to their bosses, which I think is a very important American tradition, to skip work and go to opening day. And I think when we rob our citizens of the right to transgress cultural mores like going to work and everything like that, it really robs them of their liberty and makes everything so it can be painless. The entire point and the entire fun of opening day is to skip work and lie to your boss about it. I've already told my bosses I will be lying to them come opening day, and they may or may not be cool with it.
That's cheating. That doesn't count. If you tell them you're going to lie ahead of time, it's
I'm
cheating.
up front. I'm lying.
I think that's
I
great.
don't understand. Sorry to interrupt, but I don't understand how Bill can, in the same segment, decry yoga pants and embrace opening day. It's basically like saying I hate America and I love America. I challenge him to reconcile those two views.
All right, see, no, here's the thing with yoga pants, is they're so undignified, they're so terrible and horrendous and gross. Gosh, I really don't care about seeing your heaving thighs.
Wait,
in
I'm
public.
going to respond to this, but I need to plug in my computer because it's running out of batteries. Hold on.
All right, good.
Is this
Let's-
Soviet?
I'm going to let Heather respond, and Bill's going to be
Yoga pants
muted.
are terrible. Terrible.
Move to Moscow, communist.
No, Moscow is hyper-masculine right now. You know, they're cracking down on gay people, so soon they're going to force their citizens to wear yoga pants. I think yoga pants are terrible. Yeah, I mean,
On certain people.
yeah, and those are the people that we have to ban it on everybody so that we're not.
I do
when they're muffin topping it.
But
We don't want to see muffin tops.
I was just notified by our wonderful staff here, Aaron, that aren't baseball pants basically yoga pants?
Yeah, if you're talking about the 1980s, but they're loose again. So, no, you're about 30 years too late there. Which, I mean, the 80s were a great time. The 86 Mets won, cocaine was cool.
The last time the Mets were good.
Yeah, exactly, the year of my birth. And you know, women had huge shoulder pads, and, you know, they were looking like workers, and that's when they decided that they needed the right to, you know, show everybody their business.
Okay, Bill, you're done. Heather has something very important she wants to say. Go, Heather.
Oh, you mean the girl who was laughing at rape shacks before? Yeah, yeah. Let's hear from her.
So, someone
That is
forcibly
so-
mute Bill if necessary.
First of all, that is entirely untrue. I'm going to go ahead and deny that. Well, I didn't get to hear. The unfortunate thing is I didn't get to hear Bill's absurd argument against yoga pants, so how can I possibly respond to it? But I can assume that it is absurd. Yoga pants are a beautiful thing. They enable you to live an active lifestyle in comfort and wrinkle-free comfort. They match with everything. Next to yoga pants is un-American, really. I mean, for somebody who's talking about baseball, Bill, really, I just don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, it's a betrayal of your country.
A betrayal of my country? Please. Please,
done.
that elastic masquerading is
Your opinions
a betrayal.
Your opinions are invalid here. Neal, you're up. Second worst idea any politician is going to have in 2015.
Well, I think at the swearing in of the replacement for Justice Ginsburg's, Joe Biden will go for second base with the wife of the confirmed justice. I think that's going to be the second worst decision that he makes this year. The first, I can't even begin to speculate. That's it. Joe Biden groping someone's wife. That's mine. That was mine. I know it's not as in depth as the Mets discussion we were just having in the yoga pants. But
as the host, I get the last word here, and I'm gonna say that the second worst decision any politician is going to have in 2015 is attempting to declare a Matt Harvey Day in commemoration of Matt Harvey's achievements for the Mets this year. That's solely in retribution for Bill's terrible comments on yoga pants. No, you're done. You're done. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. Want to thank our regular columnist, Scott Lincicome of the Cato Institute, Neal Doing of the Federalist, F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon. He was also here. I don't thank him. I want to thank our guest panelists, Heather Wilhelm of Real Clear Politics and Matt Dawson, St. RPH. Check him out on Twitter. Thank you for coming in, and appreciate everyone for tuning in who watched tonight. Thank you, and we'll see you again next week.
Yoga pants are Hitler. I have the last word.
Such
Thanks, guys. That was
music.
fun.